Hello there. The German economy got another shock today. Things are not looking good within the eurozone economic powerhouse. When talking about a post-Brexit era with falling industrial output, the Ramoners would have expected that to be a story from the UK. But it isn't. The European Union's industrial engine and economic powerhouse Germany is the one that's faltering. As we find out today that Germany's industrial production fell again in November for the 6th successive month. Factory output slumped by 0.7% in November, following on from a 0.3% drop in October. And it did come as a shock, as the forecasters were factoring in a November of zero growth, and Reuters analysts were expecting a 0.2% increase. Something that points to Germany still being in recession at the end of 2023. In a statement, Germany's economy ministry said, "Given current early indicators such as incoming orders and the business climate, a rapid turnaround in the industrial economy cannot be expected. However, as the year progresses, industrial production is likely to recover against the backdrop of an expected domestic economic recovery and rising exports." Expected economic recovery. Expected by the same people who got the November's figures wrong, maybe. And the ministry went on to say that the key sectors of automobiles, electrical equipment and pharmaceuticals all saw a decline. Well, that last one of pharmaceuticals shouldn't come as a surprise, given the last few years of hyperactivity. Overall, German factory output has been falling since May 2023. And it is now 5% lower than a year ago, and 9% lower than just before the pandemic struck. Nearly a tenth wiped off in the last 4 years. And Germany also saw a 2.9% fall in construction in November compared to the month before. But the one growth area for Germany was energy production, which increased by 3.9%. Although what it's powering is unclear, unless the higher power consuming industries did better than all the rest. And Germany is the most power hungry country in Europe, with France in second place, followed by the UK. Now, Reuters reports that German industrial weakness appears to be having a knock-on effect in CEE economies linked to the German auto sector. Hungary's industrial output fell by an annual 5.8% in November, and Czech industrial output dropped by 2.7% year-on-year in November. So, the UK should therefore be faring a lot worse than its EU counterparts, shouldn't it? Well, prepare for a bit of a shock. Although UK manufacturing has been going through some really tough times recently, according to the manufacturers' organisation Made UK, we were able last year to leapfrog France to become the world's 8th largest manufacturer after getting a £224 billion output boost. And last month it was being reported that manufacturing export orders had surpassed domestic orders for the first time in 4 years, indicating that UK manufacturers are looking to expand into new, faster-growing markets. But weren't we told that Brexit would kill us off, that there are no markets in the world outside of the European Union? Now, the big stopper for all modern manufacturing businesses is, of course, a plentiful supply of cheap energy. And energy supply that is consistent and not weather dependent, of course. The sort of energy supply that the likes of China and India, for example, rely on for their manufacturing successes. With the truth being that the UK could not expand the industrial base much further, because we do not have the base level of energy to power it. We have barely enough to keep the homes, schools and hospitals going. Any dream any politician has of the UK becoming a new engineering and industrial power is a pipe dream built on unicorn energy policies. How can you build lots of green stuff for both domestic use and export unless you have oodles of power to make the stuff? Wind turbines and solar panels are made by humans in factories and placed in fields. They don't magically grow there after some eco-zealot sprinkles some fairy dust. And the reality is that however green we go, we will still need ships, bridges, cars, aircraft, etc., etc., etc. And someone has to make them. And that someone should include the UK. Therefore, the UK needs plentiful, cheap energy, nuclear energy to be precise. And now we come to the subjects of the weak, wet liberal left and the weak, wet Western males. Richard.
In Iran, a lady named Roya Heshmati recently suffered 74 terrible lashes for refusing to wear something. Yes, a 33-year-old woman just experienced in 2023 the most depraved punishment. The liberal left progressives here in the West must be jumping for joy. Oh, how dare she rebel against such progressive laws. I tell you this, if the men of Europe who have grown weak need a little inspiration in their fight against globalism and against the, let's just say, problematic demographic, then maybe they should be looking to the women of Iran, who not only face extreme persecution, should they fall foul of the barbaric dress codes of the country, but also they face persecution for standing up to the brutal regime there. Because you have to understand, there has been a slow-motion revolution taking place in Iran. And it's been, well, the women have been behind it all. Oh, and the dress code I refer to, of course, is the wearing of purple socks, isn't it? I mean, I wouldn't be referring to any other form of bodily covering, would I? It really grips my anger when I hear liberal left men and women talking about freedom of choice when it comes to, let's just say, the dress codes of certain belief systems. But the sub-values of these liberal lefties who approve of these, well, they approve of these dress codes. These values are a stain on humanity and an insult to the women in Iran and other nations who are risking life and limb to rid themselves of these religious coverings. And it spits, this attitude from the liberal left, it spits in the face of the brave women facing extreme persecution for daring to remove these coverings. Coverings on their feet, of course. I wouldn't be referring again to any other form of covering, would I? Many years ago, I began following a Facebook page called My Stealthy Freedom, which follows the rebellion of women in Iran and further afield. And whilst I may not agree with everything posted on the page, I do suggest you take a look just to see how these brave women put themselves in harm's way to stand up to the oppressive, forcible wearing of these dehumanizing coverings, these coverings on their feet. So we brave men of the West, we are nothing but cowards compared to the women of Iran. Actually, most of us are cowards compared to most cowards. We have allowed our streets to become unsafe. We have allowed our daughters to become the victims of a problematic demographic. And we have handed our culture and society over to barbarians. So dull were our minds that we were easily conned into thinking that our values and our heritage were not worth saving and something to be embarrassed about and frowned upon. And the seeds of all this were planted in the 1960s. In the 60s, we had young men and women singing songs of rebellion against the system. Yet nearly all of those big singer-songwriters and influencers of the 1960s are now very much part of the machine they raged against. Not naming any names, but the pop star hippies, of the 1960s are now multimillionaires and figureheads of the establishment. Yet we continue to glorify and romanticize the 1960s as if it was some golden era. Well, the 1960s gave birth to the a nihilistic dirge of the 1970s, and we were left with a hollowed-out culture, and we walked away from our Judeo-Christian heritage. Now, some of you have asked why I mention the Judeo component in Judeo-Christian heritage when referencing our heritage. Well, aside from the fact that we used to have a much more pronounced Jewish community here in Britain and in Europe, it needs to be observed that Christ's message was initially delivered to the Jews within the framework of what we call the Old Testament, that comprises the entirety, pretty much, of the Jewish Bible. Thus, Christianity is founded within Judaism, and the Abrahamic law is found in the Old Testament, which, once again, is the Jewish Bible. Granted, there are a few differences in the canon of it all. But this is the heritage that Europe's culture was based on, and the heritage we walked away from in the 1960s. Okay, I could mention the so-called Age of Enlightenment, but that would be a very, very long video. 3 days long, actually, I think, probably. Meanwhile, in Iran, they still managed to celebrate and venerate figures from their pre-Islamic history, filled with deep pride for their past and culture, and the arts, especially poetry, which still flourishes today, even in the backdrop of their hideous, oppressive regime and software, we shall say, that almost no one in the country wants. I find it so ironic that probably one of the most sophisticated cultures in the world has been held captive by the most base and oppressive ideology ever to be conceived. And where was the support to the people of Iran against the evil regime? You know, they needed help in their uprising against the current regime. If the regime in Iran was booted out, there would be no funding for the terrible organizations currently destabilizing the Middle East. Yes, regime change in Iran probably won't make the problem go away, but the whole situation there has pivoted on Iran's funding of these organizations. But here's some very good news. In Iran, some very interesting things are happening. Millions of Iranians are turning their backs on the incumbent belief system and turning to Christ. And some of them are having some very powerful spiritual experiences. And Iran now has the world's fastest growing church. Oh, and the same can be said of China. Incredible things taking place there. It seems like something is coming and something is about to change. And the chosen are being called from amongst the nations. And I'm not talking about the 12 tribes, but those who are chosen before the foundations of the earth. Something wonderful is about to happen, but something terrible will follow. And you may completely disagree with me. So go on, have a pop at me and my beliefs in the comment section below, and have one at Jeff, because we just loves it. So what do you Deirdres and Dennises think about what has been said in today's video? Leave your gibbers and your jabbers in the comment section below for Jeff and I to read, and get yourselves over to our locals channel and sign up. Link in the descriptions box below on how to do that. And, you know, more regular content being built for the channel right now. So God bless you all, and bye for now.